It is good to have Gene Davis with us tonight, and we've been looking forward to this. And I know just every little bit somebody will say, "What do you know? What have you heard about Caleb's house?" And so my answer has been, it won't be long, and Gene Davis will be here, and she can tell you everything. All right, and so she's here, and we're excited and glad to be part of this ministry, and excited about what they're doing and going to be doing. Now, when we get done tonight, we are going to go over to the fellowship hall, and there'll be some cake and cookies and some coffee and things there. Just take a few minutes for us to spend a little time with Miss Davis and get to know her. And I think one of the questions that we keep getting to hear is, how can we help? How can we be involved? And so that'd be a good time for you to personally touch base with Miss Davis tonight. And if you can get involved, that'd be great as well, all right? Gene, so good to have you tonight. You come and you speak to our heart, whatever it is the Lord's got on your heart this evening. Thank you for being
here. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for the invitation. And I love being in a church that believes in missions. I helped build a children's home in Romania and Bulgaria. I've helped in Mexico and Africa. So that's always kind of been my heart's desire, is about missionaries. When I was in GAs many years ago, God always pulled at my heartstring about missionaries. And so I decided one day that I was never to be a missionary, that I would support my friends that were missionaries and do what I could. But when Ebenezer had first started in 1994, they were 3 preachers, and they actually had the original vision for it. And one of them, that I did not know at all, came and asked me to help. I told him no probably at least 10 or 12 times. I didn't know the first thing about opening up a children's home, and I didn't think we needed one. But God got on my heart and told me he would give me my mission field in my backyard. And I live today physically 3 minutes from where the home is. So he truly will give you the desires of your heart, sometimes when you're not even expecting it. So September the 26th of this year will be 30 years. That's hard for me to imagine. We started out with $5. The state told me it would take at least 3 years to open the home up unless we have plenty of money. And I said, well, we've raised $5. He said, ma'am, that's not going to work. But I believe that it's a new beginning for a lot of children. It's a new birth. It's a new way of life. So I told the state that I promised them it would be opened up in less than a year. God usually takes around 9 months to birth a baby, give or take. So I said, this will be a new birth, a new beginning for a lot of children, and we'll be opened up this year. And he just looked at my board and said, you've kind of got your hands full with that one, because that's not going to happen. But September the 26th is when we got our license. We formed our board February the 14th of 94. So if you count, that's less than a year. A lot's happened during that time. When I started out with 5 beautiful girls, we've now had about 1,200 children that's come through the doors of Ebenezer. We've added foster care and adoption because we saw children placed in homes for adoption that I'm really not sure. I'm not sure why that home was licensed. But anyhow, God laid on our heart for us to get our license for adoption. We adopted 25 children last year. We've already done about 15 this year. One of the things I'm really strong on is I never give up. And for our older children, a lot of times you hear social workers say, well, you're 16 years old, you're going to grow up in foster care, you'll age out. But I tell them, with God, all things are possible. Last year, we moved a 17-year-old boy into a home for adoption. This year, we have moved a 17-year-old girl in, getting ready to move another one in for adoption this month. And so God has a plan. He does, and we do not give up on them. In 1994, you heard we only had the $5, And it was a struggle. We didn't know if we was going to pay the light bill each month or what, but God always was on time. He always supplied our needs. There was a time that I only had 3 potatoes to feed 5 kids and no money. During that time, my husband and I had plans to open up a company because he had helped open up several of these companies for other people, but he had a massive heart attack. Triple bypass. Doctor said he would not live. So God said, you need to be still. You need to stay where you are. So it was a struggle. I had a daughter in college and a son in high school. But I would run to my house to see if I had toilet paper, if I had potatoes, whatever. So on this particular day, the lady said, we only have 3 potatoes, Miss Jean. What will we do? We had some cornbread and we had some green beans. And I said, well, I'll run to my house to see if I have any. So I went outside, and it was in October. It was a beautiful October day. And God said, you're always telling people you pray about everything, but you have not because you ask not. And I'm thinking, what does that mean? So I stood there for a little bit and went back in the house, and the lady said, where's my potatoes? And I said, well, I'm not sure. I'm just going to get on my knees, and I'm going to thank God for our supper tonight. And I'll ask God if He would if He would send us in some extra potatoes. So I prayed, and about an hour the doorbell rang, and at that time it was just like any private home. We had actually bought this home. It was private. And this lady said, I'm looking for a children's home. Would you know where it is? And I said, well, ma'am, this is a children's home. And she said, well, there's no signs or nothing. I said, I know. We just opened up in September. And she said, well, I don't know if you'll understand this or not. But she said, I was at the grocery store shopping. And when I was shopping, she said, it was like God told me to buy an extra bag of potatoes. And she reached down and she held up. She said, I have a 10-pound bag of potato. Would you have need of them? Of course, I told her what had happened and how we had prayed. And we definitely need the potatoes and how thankful we were. So time went on, the phone rang, and one of my board members called, and he said, are you going to have enough to pay the light bill this month? I said, I don't know. I'm praying. Depending on the Lord. And he said, what's going on? I told him about the potatoes. He said, well, why didn't you call me? I could have bought some. And I said, no, I'm trusting God. He's going to take care of us. So we talked, and he hung up, and a little bit, about an hour later, he called back, and he said, well, he said, I'm going to come see you after I get off work. He said, I've got a box, and in that box is potatoes. He said, they were going to throw them in the dumpster, as part of them's rotten and part of them's good. And he said, so can you pick out the good ones? I said, yes, I'll be so glad to do that. Thank you so much. So go back to work, and he calls again about an hour later, and he said, well, I think you can stop praying anytime you want to. He said, I think God heard your prayers about potatoes. And I said, I know, we got 10-pound bag, and you're bringing those. I said, I'm so thankful. He said, guess what's in front of my office? I said, I don't know. He said, a tractor and trailer. I said, okay, like big deal. Okay, I've seen them before. And he said, well, do you want to know what's on them? And I said, well, I guess, you know. He said, there's over 600 pounds of potatoes on this truck, and they're coming your way. So I said, thank you, Jesus. We have been without a lot of things since 1994, but potatoes ain't been one of them. In fact, I told the whole story. I condensed it down for y'all, but I told the whole story in front of about 2,000 people. And this deacon come up to me, and he said, I heard that man don't drive that trailer anymore. He said, where are your potatoes going to come from? I said, they ain't my potatoes, they're God's potatoes, and if he wants the potato barrel to stay full, he'll take care of it. So that church, the last Saturday in September, we will go to Boone, North Carolina, and the church plants a garden for us, and there's nothing in it but potatoes. We picked up 52 bushels of potatoes last year. So we will have enough potatoes to share with Caleb's home this year, for sure. So I tell you that to tell you that how we're going to get Caleb's house finished, I don't know. But I personally go back to my potato story every time we have a need, and we have lots of needs. But God said, I got this. You know, I knew when you needed potatoes. Even during COVID, when everybody was going crazy, you know, worrying about everything, I brought all of our children into our chapel. We have a small chapel. And I tried to encourage them, we're going to be okay. God's going to take care of us. And I said, y'all have any questions? And one little girl said, Miss Jean, I got a question. I said, okay, honey, what is it? She said, are we going to have enough toilet paper? Because everybody's talking about toilet paper. I said, well, what we have right now will not be enough. But God owns it all. And I said, how about we just pray for toilet paper? And we got a phone call from a company I've never heard of, had no connections with, and this guy calls me and said, I've heard about you in your home. He said, and I own a paper company, and we make toilet paper and paper towels. Would you have need of this? And this is the truth. Everybody knows when COVID was, we are still using the toilet paper to this day that we got. So God is going to take care of Caleb's house. But I want y'all to look at this short video because these are the places that our children come from. They could be faces of my children that are at Ebenezer today, but these are the situations and the places that the children that's in foster care come from. So, Johnny, if you'll play that for me. Thank you.
I'm not a bad kid. I've done nothing wrong, but I'm a sad kid. No place to call home. I've been living in this lonely room, and I've been praying for someone to choose me. They all want a baby, not a 12-year-old girl. They think I'm too old to fit into their worlds. I wish they'd take the time, but they change their minds. Nobody's child, all alone and thrown away, just a file in a social worker's case. I'm not the only one, there's so many like me. All we need's a place to grow in a loving family until that day. Nobody's child. I'm a math whiz. I like to laugh and have fun. I love to play with friends. I just wish I had some, but it's hard when
I took a little boy in week before last. He's 6 years old. His mother was on drugs. 16-year-old sister was on drugs. She already had a baby and it had been taken away from her. So the mother was in bad shape. They took her to the hospital and she went into early labor. She had a little baby boy and she died during birth. So take this little boy in, to him was the worst day of his life, no matter what the circumstances is and where these children come from, it's still their family, it's still their mom and dad. So he says, this is the worst day of my life. I said, honey, as dark as it seems to you, I promise the sun will come out and there will be better days for you. So he comes in on Tuesday. On Wednesday afternoon, I have to tell him his mom has passed away. But she gave birth to a baby boy, and we take the baby from the hospital also. So I have some friends that live in Lake Norman, and they called me, and they wanted to know if we'd bring the kids down, and they were going to let them ride boats and go fishing and do the inner tubes and all that kind of stuff, and so we did. And this little boy said, "I think this is the best day of my life. I caught my first fish." And he said, "Have you been in that bathroom?" I said, "No, but I've been here before," because it was, I'm just saying this because this is where it was. It was at Trump Golf Course in Charlotte, or in Mooresville. And they got the gold fixtures and all the stuff, you know. And I said, "Yeah, I was overwhelmed when I was seeing it the first time, too." So children go from so many emotions at Ebenezer. And I gave him a quilt when he came in. And he hugged the quilt and he said, "I love it. I love my quilt." Because you got to understand, when you saw the video, that a lot of these children that come to us are hungry and they're cold. So you may think, children don't really, what's a quilt to a child? But a quilt, we have a group of ladies actually that makes quilts, and they donate them to the children's home. So I ran into one of the ladies one day that makes quilts. She was a teacher at this school, and she had retired, and she said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "Well, you know, I'm trying to think, you know, I meet a lot of people." And she introduced herself, and she said, "When I was a teacher up there, have you got a minute for a story?" And I said, "Oh, yeah." She said, "Well, you know, I'm part of the quilt club." And I said, "Yes, and those quilts we are so thankful for. They really do mean a lot to the children." She said, "Well, I didn't know for sure if a kid really liked a quilt or not. But one day, I told all the kids to bring something to school that meant something to them, that was special, that they never wanted to lose." So kids brought, you know, the little girls brought their dolls and stuffed animals, and we had different things. And all of a sudden, your little boy gets up in front of the class, and he's got a quilt, and it's wrapped around him. He stands up in front of the whole class and says his name. "I'm in foster care. I live at Ebenezer Children's Home." And he said, "The first night I came in, Miss Jean gave me this quilt." And he said, "I never want to lose it, because if I leave Ebenezer, I can take this quilt with me, so me and my brothers won't be cold anymore." And she said, I said, "That's amazing, you know." She said, "That's not the end of the story." She said, "That's one of the quilts that I had made." Never dreamed it would go to a little boy that one day I would be the teacher for. So when we plant those seeds and do what God wants us to do, we never know how He's going to use it. I also had a friend that was a nurse, and she was worried about this little girl in school that she had bruises all over her arms, and of course, and when it was hot, she always had a sweater on, so, you know, those are a lot of signs of stuff. So one day she decided to drive to her house, and when she did, she knocked on the door, and she could hear screaming and some words that weren't appropriate, and she opened the door and walked in, and this man was raising his hand back to hit this teenage girl. And he stopped when he saw my friend, the nurse, and said some words, "What are you doing here?" you know, and stuff. And she said, "I knew something was wrong with your daughter." And she tried to get the girl to go with her, and she wouldn't go. So she left that school, went to another school, and never seen that girl again until years later. She was working at a hospital in Hickory, and she said this woman came up to her and said, "Hey, how are you?" And she said, "I'm fine, honey. How are you?" She said, "You don't remember me, do you?" She said, "No, I think you got me mixed up with another nurse." She said, I'm sorry, but I don't think we know each other." She said, "Yes." She said, "Do you remember this high school, and you followed this girl home one day, and she had bruises on her arms?" She said, "Yeah, I do remember that." She said, "I was that girl." And the nurse said, "Well, looks like you're doing good." And she said, "But I could never understand why you wouldn't leave with me that day, because it was so bad at your house." She said, "Well, you see, I had a little sister in the back bedroom, and if I left, then my sister would have got the beatings, and I couldn't leave her there with my dad." But she said, "You see, you saved my life." And she said, I didn't save your life, honey, because you never left with me." She said, "Yes, you did, My daddy continued to curse me, but he never hit me again because he was afraid that blank nurse would come back and catch him. And she said that day, in my heart I said to Jesus, one day, do you think I could be a nurse and I could make a difference in somebody's life? So she said, I graduated in the spring, and I'm a nurse today because of the difference that you made in my life. So sometimes when we plant seeds or we do a kind act for somebody, we really may not ever know, where it's going to go or how God's going to use it. But she made a difference in her life, for sure. So I have lots of stories like that. I know last year ago, Christmas, our kids had a wonderful Christmas, and churches and different people helped us with that. And we got this little girl in January. And so our kids were playing with their toys and talking about Christmas, and one of the kids said, well, what did you get for Christmas? And the little girl starts crying, and she said, I didn't get anything for Christmas. You see, my mom and myself, we were sleeping in a car, and I was going in the dumpsters to try to find food to eat so that we wouldn't be hungry. So she said, we never got anything. So my house parents that are awesome, they put the Christmas tree back up, and they called a church like this and said, we got this little girl in. She had nothing for Christmas. Will you help us? So they threw a Christmas together for that little girl that she'll always remember. So for the time that the children are with us, they're safe and all their needs are being met. I have another group of people that actually makes pillowcases for our kids. So nighttime is a hard time for our children with the nightmares and all the situations they've come from, they have to relive. So they have a hard time. So on that pillowcase, this pastor gave me this book because he knows this is like one of my favorite verses is Jeremiah 29:11. And that is embroidered on the pillowcases, so the kids have that to take with them also. Because we have so many kids that call us back and say, I was in a bad situation, I wasn't making good decisions, I was doing things that were wrong, but I had that pillowcase that you gave me, and it made me think. Miss Jean always says, God's got a plan. And we need to follow him, and trust him, and things will get better. So we have lots of needs at Ebenezer, and I know one of the main focuses here today is about Caleb's house. We have brochures out there that I would ask you would take and share with other people you work with and different people to help us get Caleb's house finished. We hope to have children in it before the end of the year. We are hopefully finishing the sheetrock maybe this week, so that's the stage we're at. So it's going to take over 300 gallons of paint. So if anybody has any connections to paint companies, we're in the market for lots of paint. We need painters, all of that kind of stuff that we're also going to need. You know people that I definitely don't know. I'm like the new kid on the block over here, and I just stopped at Lowe's on the way over here, and I'd stopped there before and just told them who I was and what I was doing and asked them if they would just help me with the light fixtures here. They're going to get back to me, so y'all pray that they're going to donate the light fixtures. So if you could help us make contacts with people. If you can imagine, we've got 11 bedrooms and all these bathrooms, so we're going to need plenty of sheets and towels and pots and pans and glasses and furniture and you name it. You think about when you got married and people gave you all these wedding showers, because you started out with nothing. Well, we're going to start out like that, but on top of that, we can have up to 9 kids to come along too. So if you have connections to anybody that does all these things, we actually are going to have a couple different nurses on call because when children come into us, they have to see a nurse within 24 hours or we have to take them to the doctor. And a lot of times we take them on Fridays or We can't get a doctor's appointment for a week, so we are going to need nurses to help volunteer and help us with that also. Of course, because I'm almost 2 hours away, I can't open up the home until I have a social worker on staff there. So if you have any connections to that, we would love to have that. And we, of course, have to have house parents to spend the night and stay with our children. So even when the home gets finished, if I don't have a social worker and house parents, you know, we've already got calls on the kids. We get calls from Asheville and over in this area all the time, but we just don't have enough staff members, you know, to take them in. So those are some of the bigger needs that we definitely have for sure. We're doing a golf tournament next month in Taylorsville to raise money, you know, to help with the needs over here. So we're constantly working. We stood in the streets in Ashe County to raise money to get the house built. So we're working all that we can every day to try to raise money and try to meet the needs that. So we're trying to post on Facebook and some places. We got a wish list started on Walmart, and we got to do Amazon and a couple more, but we've been really busy. So if you know anybody that has any connections, and give us towels and sheets and all of the above things, you know, that would be a big blessing that we have. We also, when we get opened up over here and we do get a social worker, you know that we will license foster homes in this area because there's so many kids in this area. Of course, there's no way we can meet all their needs. So we will do foster care and adoption over here, but I have to have people, you know, to help me with those needs, of course, for sure. So I believe the church is called to take care of the orphans. I know these are not legal orphans, most of them, because most of them do have parents. They're just parents that needs Jesus and needs to make some good decisions in their life. I think one of the hardest challenges that we have sometimes, and I hear that from my social workers, but on the other hand, it's one of the biggest opportunities that we have is to minister to the parents of these children. That was one of the hardest things in the beginning that I had to do, especially when I had a mother that was coming from prison, and she wasn't very nice to me, and it was a lot. And I'm thinking, Lord, I didn't know these parents came with these kids. What am I doing? I can't do this. This is like, I don't deserve to be cussed out. But you know, one day I was praying, going to bed, and the Lord just woke me up out of the blue, and it's just like God said, I died for her just like I did for you. You need to love her through my eyes, not your judgmental eyes that you're doing right now. They were 3 of the first kids I ever had, and I still am very, very close to them to this day. I've been the mother of the bride at the wedding, very involved with the son. But not long ago, I was in a store, and somebody came up from behind me and put their arms around me, and I went, you know, like I didn't feel good. Who's behind me? And it was that mother. And she said, I thought, oh, my goodness, what's she going to say now, 25 years later or whatever? But she said, I just want to thank you that you proved yourself, that you have been there for my children all of these years, and you still are helping take care of my children. And I want to say thank you. I had one of the fathers of one of the teenage girls I had in the beginning, and he got saved in one of our homes, and he got on his knees, and he said, asking the Lord to forgive him, he said, it's so sad that my daughter went through what she went through to end up at Ebenezer for me to be saved. And he said, but you made a difference in her life, and you made a difference in my life. So as hard as it is sometimes, just pray for us, work with the parents, because they don't want to thank us for anything we've done. We didn't fix the macaroni 5 times this week, or we didn't do this, or we didn't do that, or whatever. But, you know, God knows our hearts, and God knows we love these children, and we're going to do anything. And I always make a statement, once you become part of Ebenezer, you're always part of Ebenezer, and they know that the Ebenezer family, we will always be there for them. So I can't wait to meet some of you and talk with you, and thank you for giving me this time. And all I'm here is to share what God's doing at Ebenezer and what he's going to do in Caleb's house. Caleb's house is on, if you go to Catawba Falls, there's a sign there that a man made for us, and you can see the sign there that says to Caleb's house. It's on top of a beautiful mountain. But pray for Mr. Philip Wishon because he was raised in a children's home. His church owned this land, and he had prayed for over 20 years that God would put a house on top of that mountain. I told him I think I would have given up because here I opened up this house, in less than a year, and he's been faithful and prayed for over 20 years, and that's why it's called Caleb's house. So God's got a plan for Caleb's house, and thank y'all so much for being a part of Caleb's house, and please continue to pray for us.
Miss Davis, we got something to give you tonight. This is from the children of our church. For our Vacation Bible School this year, we made our special offering every night for Caleb's house. And so this comes from the kids in our Bible school. I was sitting there thinking, really, you don't think about things like this, how the Lord puts things together. And last Sunday night we have our McDowell Pregnancy Care Center come. This morning, the burden that Lynn and Kim have for marriages and for families, and then tonight, Miss Davis and taking care of kids. And while she's going through that, I'm thinking, well, I've been looking at the schedule. I've been looking at the schedule for months. I know who's coming, but I never really thought about what we're going to have service after service. But here we are. And then I thought, this year we've been praying, been talking a little bit. I hadn't really pushed it a whole lot till this month, our faith mission offering. And, the challenge to give sacrificially. Every missionary except for Lynn. Lynn's the only one that I've ever met that said, I don't want any money. And he told me that up front. We don't need money. I don't want money. I want people to pray, and we want to help people. All right. But you can ask these missionaries. There's always a need for money. And as you were sharing some of your stories, I couldn't help but think about George Mueller. George Mueller, back in the 1600s, had a group of children's homes. He operated just like that. And you can read his diary. If you've never read his diary, you ought to get his diary and read it. He can tell about gathering the kids into the dining room for supper and not have anything. They didn't have anything. And he said, we're just going to thank God for this meal. And they'd go to praying for the food that they didn't have to eat. And when they'd get done, there'd be a knock on the door, and it'd be the butcher or the baker, whoever. And that's living by faith. Now, you don't know the honest truth. That's living the way most of us don't want to live. Don't want to live. I hope you'll get this and read about Caleb's home. And we've kind of talked about this after Miss Davis was with us the first time. And sponsoring a room, $2,500, depending on what it is, $10,000 to sponsor a room. And as she was talking tonight, I thought, I don't know anything better that we could do with our faith promise than to really, really give. And, not just what we can give, but look, I just feel like as a church, we ought to give sacrificially to it. That we ought to take on. Now, this is, we're willing to go, and you know this. Now, we'll be glad to go to Peru and all these other places and do what needs to be done and see the Lord work. But this is a work right here in our own back door. This is right here. There's nothing better, nothing nearer to my heart than to see kids taken care of. And I want to challenge our church family tonight. We'll get together. We'll try to get something together this week, and next Sunday we'll get a challenge before our church family. Let's meet it. So let's get in behind this and help these folks. Amen? All right. We're going to dismiss. I encourage everybody, let's go over